Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Socially Distant Tea Time. I'm Kaitlin McGrayus, founder of Be Her Village, and here with me is Evelyn Page, licensed clinical social worker, and Laura Otten, licensed clinical social worker. They are both maternal mental health specialists, and these are our socially distant tea times that we started because we were all quarantined with our small children and are really freaking stressed out. And I was like, hey, let me share my experience, and you guys can give me therapy on live TV.
So here we are, like 2.5 months later, almost 3 months later.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, just theme of the week, I feel a little bit like it's week 1 of the pandemic again. Like that's where my stress levels are this week. I was doing so good and I was like in a bubble and in a happy routine and I was feeling good. And I think part of that was because the uncertainties of the pandemic had come down and there was food and there was the medical system was still in place and my husband had recovered. But we have to address it. We have to address it. There's race riots.
Yeah.
There's riots, there's protests, there's maybe a revolution happening, and there's, no matter which side or which opinion you take, and I don't really want to get into any of that. I have lots. If you want to see that, just go on my personal Instagram account. But it's stressful. It's stressful whether you support the police. It's stressful whether you support the protesters. It's stressful whether you feel torn between the two of them. It just feels similarly, for me anyway, in the beginning of the pandemic, what felt overwhelming about it for me was that there wasn't anywhere to go to escape it. And that's what this feels like. It feels like parts of me are excited that there's maybe going to be change, right? But with change, like in any good therapeutic relationship, like when I go to therapy, it's like, it's good, but it tears me apart and it's
painful
and awful. And so that's kind of where I am right now. It's like my direct immediate life is not affected. My kids are still here. They're kind of driving me nuts a little bit, but I'm having a hard time like turning off the news and not the news, I don't watch the news, but turning off my version of the news, which is Facebook, which is the groups I'm in, which is New York Times, like looking at, newspapers. It's really scary what's going on there. So make it better, ladies, make it better. Give us all your secrets and all your tips.
We have to talk about this, and no, I don't want to go into the specifics of it for this podcast, though it is an important conversation to be having. But I'm so glad you said that because it's been on my mind as a mother. You're just what you said of like, we were kind of in our bubbles, and I have to remind myself of that being a huge privilege, that when I look down at my children, when they're with me, I'm not scared for their safety based on their skin color. It's a protective factor for them. So I can be in a bubble. And so millions of people cannot be in that bubble. But I'm thinking of my clients who are early postpartum and having this on top of everything else and just trying to breathe through all of it. And that's a thing too with this. I can't breathe, and how that experience, if you've seen the video, and then feeling anxiety of not being able to breathe kind of mirrors each other right now.
I couldn't watch the video, to be honest with you. It's like one of my protective, I don't know. I couldn't watch the video. I watched the video of, let's just go there. I watched the video of Amy Cooper because I try not to watch any of the videos because I can't, because I really like soak it up. And I think a lot of mothers, and I wonder if you guys could speak to this too. I think probably it's partially just that's my personality and my disposition, but I think partially as mothers, we have to be in tune with what's going on and what's safe and what's not safe. We're constantly evaluating our environment and our children's environment for dangers. And so when I watch videos, I soak it up and it really affects me. I have trouble sleeping and I have trouble turning off my brain and I have trouble focusing on the things I want to focus on. And it really infiltrates my consciousnness. And so I didn't watch the video of George Floyd being murdered, and I'm not planning on watching it. But the Amy Cooper video I watched her wield her whiteness against a man who was doing nothing. He was asking her to leash her dog. It's just, yeah, I don't remember where I was going with that, but I didn't watch the video. Oh, I can't breathe. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of like at a loss for words here, and I'm at a loss for words with my children. And it's like, yeah, please.
I think it's also important to, you know, kind of acknowledge the privilege that you have in being able to turn that off, because all of the people in the Black community can't, you know, even if they're not watching that specific video, it's something that is just so pervasive and what they see every day. You know, you turn on the news and it's yet another Black person, some person of color being murdered, you know. So I think it's important to just acknowledge the privilege that white people in this country have. You know, those are conversations that happen in my house a lot. You know, I know I'm very light skinned, but I do identify as a Latina. My husband is white. So from the get-go, those conversations were happening, and we adopted a biracial child. You know, she will grow up to be a Black woman in a white country, predominantly white country. So in some ways we don't have the luxury of not addressing it. You know, we can't take a break from it because, like you said, Laura, like I look at my kids and, you know, I have a daughter who's Black, I have another child who's biracial, you know, Latina and white. Those are going to be conversations that are happening all the time. We can't kind of escape it. And I think, you know, in hearing even just from clients, you know, both clients of color that I've been seeing and white clients that I've been seeing, it is similar to what you said, Laura, like of just like that uncertainty again of like, I don't know what to do, but we need to keep talking about this.
You really do. And you're right. I do have the luxury of not only, is that me? Okay. Of not only not watching the video, but of walking around this earth as somebody who doesn't have to fear for it. So I'm on quite a journey here of like recognizing all this and waking up to it. And I'm trying to call other white people out on it. A lot of people that I grew up with are, you know, all lives matter, blue lives matter, and the protesters are animals. And it's, oh my God, it's so hard to watch. But I remember I didn't feel, you know, I grew up in Levittown, it was a working class town. And I think there's this idea of like privilege being wealth. And we didn't have wealth. We don't have generational wealth. I'm hoping to create some for my kids, but it's like still a little iffy. But I've learned to look for the privilege, the white privilege. And so my son, I lost him last Easter. We lost him in the woods. He had gone on a hike and he got separated and he didn't come back. And there was like a 45-minute manhunt for him. And at the very end, I had found him and I was racing him back to my mother's backyard, and he was hysterically crying. And he's Hispanic. My husband's Hispanic. All three of my children are. But my son that I lost, white presenting, white passing. He looks exactly like me. And the police were called by my mother, and like 12 of them, and they were like the cops that were on for Easter. They were like these, I like wanted to pat them on their heads. They were like young, white, wonderful police officers that were there to try to help, but you know. And I remember it was such a high stress situation, and I ran up, and they just got there, and they filled the woods, and I ran up with my son, and I just looked at them and I said, "We got him, he's okay." And they were like, "Oh, you got him? Yeah, he's okay? Okay." And they walked out, and they got back in their squad cars and they left. And it struck me in the moment when I walked up to them with my son, that as a white woman with a white son who just lost her son in the woods for 45 minutes wasn't really a great look. Like, and I realized that it was so privileged of me to be able to say to my fellow white person who happened to be a cop, "I'm good, got this," you know? And I had a feeling that if I was any other race, but specifically a Black person, and I lost my kid in the woods for 45 minutes, I don't know that it would have gone so smoothly. I mean, they didn't even check him out. They didn't see his side of the story. They didn't question anybody. They were there to help us. And I think I realized in that moment, I didn't fear for my life. I didn't fear for my children's lives. I didn't fear that they were going to ever look at me as anything other than a caring mother. And I think it's incidences like that where I'm like starting to realize just how much privilege I have, even if it's not privilege I'm asking for, and even if it's that privilege should be afforded everybody. You know, I don't think that I should be treated worse. I think that everybody should be treated with the same support and respect and assumption of innocence that I was given on that day. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. You guys talk now.
Well, I would encourage you and all me and all the white people, we need to do our own educating on this and not ask for people of color to help us once again, because we have certainly taken enough from them. So there's so many, and they're circulating online of books we can read, books for our children, especially if you're listening to this. And like you said, like a lot of us white people associate privilege with wealth. And especially if you grew up as a poor white person, you're thinking, what are you talking about privilege? But there are tons of readings for that. There's tons of things to educate yourself on that and hopefully be open to at least hearing it and listening to it. And as far as for this podcast with mothering and parenting, parenting is political. So no matter what your stance is on this and what you're thinking as you're listening to this, if you're thinking like, well, I just want to parent without politics or without racism, without any of that, that's impossible, because as parents, we do need to be political, whether that's the fact that you want your child to have clean drinking water at school, or you want your child to be exposed to different cultures, or your child just not to be racist or be a victim of racism. It is political, so you need to get involved and to educate yourself.
Right.
Big message to the early postpartum moms in the 4th trimester: take care of yourself and take care of your baby. I think sometimes there's this pressure that, we call it the white guilt of like, I have to do something, and you just feel bad all the time. And we do need to be mindful of taking care of ourselves, so then we can be active and be in there and be involved. As Evelyn said, recognize that being in the bubble and focusing on yourself is a privilege, because, George Floyd called out for his mother in the video. And for every mom, I don't know how you could be a mom and not have that tear at your heart. And imagine his mother watching that, and how she must feel. So knowing that your bubble is privilege, but if you're in a place right now where you need to turn off the news and live in that bubble because you just had baby 3 weeks ago and you're getting no sleep, and that's okay. Take care of yourself until you get to the point. And maybe you're okay donating money or reading up on children's books on racism. Maybe that feels okay to you. Doing something, but making sure that you're healthy. Same thing if you're struggling with anxiety or depression. Keep yourself healthy so then you can be active and involved when you get to a better place. But recognize that that's privilege. As a person of color, you wouldn't be able to, I'll just wait a few months before I think about that. You can't do that when you're a person of color.
Right, and knowing that it's not kind of like a just a destination, like once I get here, I'm done kind of dealing with racism, like I've learned everything I need to learn. It's a continual process that everybody needs to work on, and so yeah, I agree, totally need to take care of yourself and give yourself space, especially I know for me and Laura, like the majority of our clients are, postpartum moms or moms, kind of dealing with that whole phase of life. So it can feel really overwhelming to think like I've, got to keep my kid alive and healthy and safe, and I have to learn all these other things that maybe I just didn't think about before. But it doesn't mean you have to run out and read, 50 books and, buy all of these, resources to educate your kids. But know that it's going to be a continual process. It doesn't just end one day. You don't just get to this state of nirvana and I'm
woke, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
Story. It's definitely an urge for that though. And I have that urge. I want someone to label me the good white person. I want to donate to a Black midwife or a Black birth center, or post something on Instagram that will give me the label good white person. And I know that's absurd, and that's why I'm saying it, because if I'm feeling like that, even though intellectually I know that that's not right, I'm sure that there's other people out there that want that. So it's really great that you guys are talking about that, continual work, and it's always going to be a process. I think that's part of what is really difficult about this time, though, is that when we talk about typical postpartum anxiety, or even the anxiety surrounding the pandemic, there was this the messaging from you guys, and this is not for you guys, I'm just in the context of our podcast, was, you know, just focus on your own family and kind of turn off the news and keep it like you, was to make a bubble and was to feel grounded in yourself. And the answer to this kind of distress is actually the opposite of that. It's to keep feeling uncomfortable and to think about why you're feeling uncomfortable and to take action to try to right it in whatever power that you have. It might be donating $5. It might be calling people out on Facebook that's uncomfortable. It might be having conversations with your own family. And I'm sure there's lots of, you know, writing letters, and there's lots of anti-racist work we can all be doing. But I think this is a really interesting time, because it's the answer to our feelings as white people, our helplessness and our struggle with this is not to turn it off. It's actually the opposite. So there's no right answer. It just
yeah. And reaching out to, you know, friends of color that you may have, and offering support, and, you know, kind of starting that conversation with them, and being open to, they might say to you, I don't want to talk to you about this, and being okay with that, you know, because even if you're the white person that wants to do this work, you know, you have to listen to what, you know, what those people of color are saying, you know, what those communities are saying to you, and be okay with that, you know, because they may not want to talk to their white friend about what's going on. But
especially the white friend that, Kaitlin, you want to be labeled as a good white person, so do I. Like, and any white person would be lying if they don't own up to that. But not looking for our friends or colleagues or neighbors of color to give us that label of like, let me prove to you how not racist I am. You know, that's not what we should be doing right now. But listening, really, and processing those emotions with other white people of privilege, and confronting that privilege too.
I've done more confronting of white people that are saying horrible racist things, and they're not even, I don't think I was ever that bad, but like, they're not even understanding the basic foundation that racism still exists. You know, they think that racism is calling someone a name or actively being mean to a person based on their skin color. Like, they don't have the structural understanding of systemic racism and how you can be partaking in that even if it's not your fault.
Yeah.
You
sort of all those
didn't do it.
All the systems that perpetuate racism in this country.
Right. It's built in. I just posted something, and I can post it with this. It was this little cartoon that explained systemic racism. And it was so interesting because I learned a lot watching it. And it talks about how there was redlining. So the politicians like circled neighborhoods that were Black and like decided that those neighborhoods shouldn't have any funding. So bankers wouldn't loan to them, public programs wouldn't loan to them, and so they couldn't buy houses, they weren't allowed to go to college. And it sounds really like it was generations ago, so it sounds kind of like, how could that affect anything? But I grew up in Levittown, New York, and in World War II, this was the first suburb, you know, that's what we celebrated in Levittown in high school, you know, the 50 years of Levittown. It was the first suburb of New York. It was manufactured by William Levitt. And it was low, I think it was like $8,000 or something. And there was low cost loans for all these veterans coming back so they could start families. And Black people were not allowed to buy houses. So Black veterans who had just served and fought in a war for our country were not allowed to buy houses. And the repercussions of that had nothing to do with me. I was not alive at the time, but I'm benefiting from the fact that those houses were available and my family bought them. And you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's as disconnected as any of us think it is. But it's uncomfortable to think about that too, that these programs that are building wealth for white people are devastating Black communities generation after generation after generation. It's really difficult. I also want to just speak from the white perspective of, I think it's hard I find, and maybe you guys have some insight on this, I find it hard to balance, so I'm sure other people do that are well-meaning. I've had friends say to me, like, I'm not informed enough, I don't want to speak on social media because then I get attacked, I'm being told I'm doing it the wrong way. And I've been told I've done it the wrong way, and I probably was, but you know, it's like, that's part of the learning process, right? So there's this balance of being told as a white person that you have to center Black voices, that you have to like listen and give them the tools and give them the money and let them be heard and be centered. And of course, but then there's also this other thing where we hear that white people are the only ones that can fix this because we're the ones that are the problem, and white people can't be silent, and white silence is the problem, is that we are just accepting this and staying silent on the issues, and Black people are the only ones speaking out on it. So I find myself a little bit having trouble navigating and doing it really imperfectly, and being willing to do it imperfectly because I don't know how else to do it, because I don't want to do nothing, but of trying to navigate this place where I can center Black voices and amplify Black voices, but also do the work and speak out and try to work on it as a white woman. Does that make sense? Do you feel like that at all?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking, I know I'm the wrong person to be talking to as a fellow white woman. So you need
that's
to
part of the work.
What's that?
Of white people talking to white people,
Yeah.
That's, it's part of the work. It's not the only work, but it's part of it.
But getting guidance from people of color of, yes, you're lead on this and I've got your back on this, and I'm going to lend my voice and lend my money and resources, and also accept the fact that I'm supporting raising you up and erasing and being anti-racism, but I also need to acknowledge that that's going to possibly hurt me and bring me down, which is a good thing, but it's also going to be something hard to face. My husband and I have talked about that. We support some policies that will hurt us financially. We will have to give more than what we are currently giving. And we have made a conscious choice of, we would like to support this anyway, because this is what's best for everyone. And it goes down to that fundamental, I care about my community. I care about everyone in my country, not just people who look and sound and act like and pray like me, or whatever it is. So that is part of the white conversation too, of you can't just wave your sign, but you also need to accept the fact that as we try to raise up people of color to level the playing field, also means bringing me down. And in some ways, not in bringing down sounds is a bad way to put it.
It's not the right word, but I get what you're saying. It's like we have to correct the fact that we are privileged. We shouldn't have the inequality. So,
right.
Yeah. And
Amy Cooper waved that around, and she just personified it. It was actually kind of great to have it be so blatant, because you couldn't question what she was doing. So it was, people do that all the time, but she did it so blatantly that like, oh, well, there you go.
And just to point out about Amy Cooper is that she's a liberal. She votes Democrat. Yeah. She votes blue. And that I think was most enlightening about her, was that it doesn't matter what party you're on. Like, it doesn't matter which politician you support. I mean, it matters. Vote, research, vote. But she used her whiteness against him, and very easily could have gotten him killed. Very, very easily, and was essentially threatening his life because he asked her to put her dog on a leash.
To protect the birds. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It was like the rule. Like, there was a sign there. It's like, leash your dog. Like,
and even if it wasn't the rule, like, he just asked her to, he wasn't threatening her. So this whole, and I think part of it is like, there's going to be Amy Coopers. There's going to be racist people. There's going to be bad cops. It's kind of like parents are going to make mistakes. It's what we do afterwards. Why wasn't Amy Cooper charged with making a false 911 report? Why wasn't George Floyd's murderer, charged and arrested the same day? Why weren't the other three? Why weren't all the other Black unarmed men and women that were killed in police custody? Why weren't all of their, why weren't they convicted? It's not, it's, I don't know, nothing is as simple as Facebook memes.
Right. I mean, it's interesting just to kind of think about, and I was listening to this too, I think it was on, I forget if it was a podcast or NPR, but, if the police are able to arrest hundreds of people protesting, they could have arrested 4 people, the 4 police officers, So it's possible. It's just, again, sort of this systemic and institutionalized racism that exists, you know, and I mean, police officers are afforded a different level of justice. You know, they aren't arrested immediately. They're given time to consult with an attorney, consult with a lawyer, prepare a statement. You know, Black men and women that are arrested aren't given that privilege.
Mm-hmm. And also, I just, oh my God, I hate the feedback. I don't want anyone to confuse anti-racist with anti-police, because at least that's not where I am right now. I have friends and family members and lots of people that I know that are police people or that are married to them or love somebody who's a police officer. I posted something this morning and it was really interesting. So as a doula and as somebody who supports people during their birth, I'm really into evidence-based care, right? So that's looking at the science and seeing what the right thing or the wrong thing is. So I'm not the person out there shouting like home birth is for everyone or doctors are terrible or, you know, hospitals are bad, because that's not true. And it's just, you can't lay that uniformly out, but there's definitely improvements that need to be made, and doctors, some of them are bad and doing the wrong thing, and some hospitals, absolutely, there's a culture that doesn't consider women, and the evidence shows that and lays out how to fix it. So what I found really interesting, and it was something that just kind of cut through all the like all lives matter, Black lives matter, like all of this just shouting from both sides, it's not actually productive, was a post by a group, and I can share it also, lots of things to share on this post, a post that had collected, it was a group that collected all the data about police officers, and they broke down like actual steps that reduce police violence. And it's not the things you think. It's not, it's actually not body cams. It's not it's not implicit bias training. It is their contracts, paying attention to their contracts, because their contracts often rehire bad cops and wipe away records of abuse. There's algorithms that they can use, that police use to anticipate who's going to be more likely to commit a crime. They can turn that on themselves and look at records and see who's most likely to kill somebody that's unarmed. And so using the science and the techniques, Oakland went from having 8 police killings a year to 0, because they were using that, and they were literally just firing bad officers, because you have to do something to keep people accountable. So that kind of approach is what needs to happen. I mean, definitely there needs to be a conversation about racism and systemic racism and policing and racism, but there are a lot of good people who are police officers in the system that would like to have a better system, that would like their fellow officers to be fired and prosecuted without the backlash, right? Like without their, I don't mean without the backlash, but within like the, what is the word? Like the blue code? It's like it's the not ratting on cops. It's the not,
The blue line.
the what?
The blue line.
Is that what it is?
I forget.
I don't remember what it's called, but essentially this, like the no snitching that there is on the streets, the same thing exists in the police department. And if we can get scientific, evidence-based solutions that take the pressure off of cops from snitching on each other, and we can then get rid of them systematically, that will provide justice, and that will be one step forward, you know? But right now, we don't have any leadership from the government. If anything, our federal government is stoking the flames of this fire and aggravating the entire situation. And there's no clear path forward right now that I can see. And I think that's part of what's making this week exceptionally difficult, is the lack of a clear path forward.
And since you're talking to us as maternal mental health specialists, and certainly not, Evelyn, I can't speak for you, but I'm not an expert on this. It goes back to what am I well enough for right now? And what do I have control over? So what can I do? And remember, like, this is, as Evelyn, you said it, this doesn't just end. So it's not, okay, I'm going to donate here or go to this protest and then I've done my piece and it's over. it's going to be a continuous process. So for those moms who are not doing well right now mentally or are early postpartum, it's okay. Take care of you and your baby, and then take actionable steps when you're well. And it's day by day, and keep listening and learning and listening to the Black and brown voices, to learn and confront and be uncomfortable and sit with that feeling of being uncomfortable, which is, as you, Kaitlin, you started out by saying with therapy, you should feel uncomfortable. If you're never uncomfortable in your therapy, then you need a new therapist, because we need to confront these things in order to change them. So step by step, control, what we have control over, actionable things, and taking care of yourself in order to be able to give, I think, is the mental health standpoint on this. Evelyn, would you add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't do everything all the time, just exactly like in motherhood. You can't be everything and do everything, but you can kind of take the steps that are okay right now. Like you said, Laura, if it's right now, donating what you can, if you can, if it's just reading, informing yourself, and thinking about how am I going to raise, an anti-racist child, if that's a value that's important, start doing the work now, even if it's reading, 2 pages out of a book, or getting the books, following the social media that helps educate you on that, and do what you can, because there's not like an end date. It's not like, you go to, a workshop for a day and you're like, oh, I'm anti-racist. It's a continual process. So, and it's okay to kind of learn and make mistakes along the way, because, we all will, just like in motherhood.
And remember, parenting is political, no matter what your standpoint is. We all want our children to be safe, have access to clean water, be educated, have opportunities. At the foundation of all this is, we want what's best for our kids, and that involves becoming political and having our voice heard. And if more mothers and fathers, spoke up and about what we want for our children, then we would be in a better direction than we are right now.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having this conversation. Like you said, Evelyn, I think even as 2 white women and a woman of color, these are the conversations that need to happen, even though they're uncomfortable. As you watch me and Laura stumble through, we don't have all the answers, but we're trying, and we're going to keep trying, and we're probably going to make mistakes, and I'm happy to learn from them. So thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Thank you.
And us next time.